Schools Policy Committee meeting for December 1st. Go ahead and do introductions around the table. I'm Haley Lowry, and I get to be the chair of the Policy Committee this year.
Michelle DePass, a Policy Committee member.
Julie,
Board member.
Julie Remembrance Board and Committee member.
Mary Kane, Senior Legal Counsel. Liz Large, running
Running
late
late
as
as
usual.
Rachel, paralegal. And we have Terry Proctor with us, who is our wizard. I always feel like you're the Wizard of Oz back there behind the curtain, making everything run. And then we have Kara Bradshaw, who does all the magic of keeping us on track. We're going to begin with the compulsory enrollment age and grade level entrance policy. We're going to be voting on passing this policy out to the full board today. Liz, where are we on this policy? Is Emily going to be here for this?
Emily was going to be here, and I think she may still be coming, but there haven't been any changes coming out of the last policy committee meeting. So the same changes that were discussed are reflected in the red line draft you have. She did add a staff report, so any word from her?
No.
If there are no questions, the committee can act. If you'd like to wait, if you have questions for her, you can wait.
We just, for what it's worth, and I'm just trying to go through it right now, we just 8 minutes ago got a response from the TAGAT council to the letter.
Yeah. And I think you are aware, I think she included it in the report. She had, there had been a question after, or during the last meeting about whether she had met or would be meeting with some of the TAGAC people, and she did attend a meeting, I want to say about a month ago. And the information that was presented to you in the staff report is what she provided to the TAGAC committee about the rationale. I think she also, if you recall, in her last appearance here, she talked about how they had pulled it from TAG because it didn't seem an appropriate place for this subject matter to be on TAG.
So it sounds like we do have some questions, so let's then wait till Emily's here to maybe fully respond to those.
There are questions?
I mean, Julia, do you have?
I'm trying to get the letter up.
Okay, I mean, I'm
Yeah, let's
trying to process it right now, and I didn't have a chance to go through the 120 pages. And I don't know. The other,
120 pages of,
whatever it was, the attachment. I just printed out the letter.
just a moment, I'm going to go call.
I didn't print out the 120 pages.
I can see why you didn't print out the 120 pages. That was I'm pulling it up in board books. Was that in board books, Julia?
It was. And then, like I say, we just got the,
Response from TAGA.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now.
I mean, I think the basic issue is that what we're hearing from the district is this is not a program that benefits a large number of kids. It doesn't, there are equity issues within the implementation of it, and it doesn't seem to be doing what we want it to be doing. What we're hearing from the TAG folks is their feeling is that families who do have, precocious learners value this program and they'd like to see it continued. So we as a board then have to decide, policy committee, are we gonna ask staff to look at that, or are we gonna say, we hear that staff has their response around these things. So let's wait till Emily gets here,
Okay.
and then we'll go ahead and.
I mean, I'm fine with it moving out of committee. I guess I also would reserve the right that I want to take time to read through the materials that were provided and
I'd say that too, I'm really supportive of the staff's recommendation, particularly because of the racial inequities that they outlined, or the disparities, I should say, and also have.
Weren't you a grade skipper?
Yeah, I skipped
I think I
kindergarten.
remember that.
I skipped kindergarten, look where it got me. I mean,
So and I think that that's, okay, so it sounds like we've got some consensus, so let's go ahead and take a vote to move this out of committee and to the board. And
With the caveat that we'll have questions for Emily.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this isn't, supporting the adoption, I'm supporting getting it out into the public comment period, but
Yeah,
I wanna
great.
look at the material,
I
just.
think that would
to
be
get
excellent,
clear.
Yeah.
the timing too.
that would be great,
Okay.
okay.
If I may interrupt really quickly, we just got an email out today.
We saw,
We
saw
just,
it.
okay, which is why
Okay.
I want time to, so,
So we're gonna go ahead and vote on moving policy up first. Screenshot. 4.10.020-P from the committee to the full board. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 so, sorry, so we're just recommending a first reading.
Yes.
Okay.
We
You-
went
are you
trying
gonna-
to-
Yeah, are you gonna vote, Julia?
Yeah, I just wanna make sure I knew what I was.
Yes, we're voting to move it out of the committee to the full board for consideration.
For a first reading.
Yeah. Do you have a vote, Julia?
I said yes.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and move that then, and you all have those notes for Emily. Great. Okay, next is 5.50.030-P, complaint policy.
So this is the first time we brought these round of changes. We are not expecting any action from the committee today. This is designed to enhance the evolution of the complaint policy, to endeavor to continue to make it more clear how complaints are filed and which ones go in which path. And it's a complex landscape. I think about it in three buckets. There's the complaints that have a specifically defined complaint procedure specific to those, like Title IX, Title II, SPED, there are a number of those. Then you have the Division 22 specific topic complaints, and then you have other. And I want to give Mary and Leaf, some other staff who've been working hard to try to make it more the structure when you go to the conflict resolution page to try to figure, here's the complaint, we'll help you get it in the right place.
Mhm.
And these policy amendments are designed to further clarify, to make clear that every complaint has a home. They may be different homes depending on the type of complaint. And Division 22 is its own animal, which is, again, not an intuitive thing to explain, but it's a very important part of the standards compliance through the state of Oregon. So I think that's the tee up.
Yeah.
Anything, Mary?
No, and I think that what we've just kind of clarified in the policy is that whatever the complaint is, there is a clear process for it, and there's an established timeline by which the community member, whoever, will receive a response. And it's consistent. We wanted to keep it as consistent as possible, so it's within 60 days, which is what now what we have as a timeline for the Division 22 complaints. So
I had just one comment in reading through the materials, and I'm looking for it here, but it talked about language access, which can be a barrier. But I think there's also, I think that might be under the section where the racial equity and social justice lens. Absolutely, having materials all in English is a barrier, but I also think since we know that we see white families at disproportionate numbers, compared to the population, that it's not just language, it's also understanding and awareness. And so I would really hope that, and by the way, the website looks great, the landing page looks great. Once you click down into the specifics, it's a little bit,
and
it's
there
a lot
is,
to read.
as you note on the top, a translation page, so you can click on to language that you need.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think, so that's one barrier, and there are additional barriers of just people knowing, I'm just saying to be specific about Black families, perhaps other families of color understanding how to make a complaint, how to advocate for their
Or
children.
that you even can. That you even can make
That
an
you
actual
can,
complaint,
yeah,
right? I
because
don't know
I
that
would-
everyone knows that. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, so it's, it's great to have a revised policy, and it would be really great if everyone knew how to access it. I mean, I would love to see more families of color complaining, if that's,
I would like to
that
see
would be successful.
fewer complaints overall, but a more representative breakdown. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we're getting stuff right initially.
Yes.
I know the superintendent and lots of people here want me to say, and I want to say it too, our goal is to resolve concerns as quickly as possible at the lowest level possible. But there needs to be a mechanism if people are not getting resolution and this escalation piece. Every time we talk about it, we want to remind ourselves in the community that it is really important that we have strong resolution-focused conversations at every level. Sooner resolution, better relationships,
Yes.
concerns.
And
And
what
that,
we're
and that
wins.
came through.
But I do think part of that should be informing people that we have a complaint policy. So
I
I'm
think
wondering,
that's
like,
what I'm getting at.
as
is
we
that-
have parent handbooks and that kind of information in the fall, how do we get the information out to people that this is an option?
I think at the back to school nights or at registration, if people register after school starts, or if there should be a way for us to tell all families.
We're hoping to do that. So this is the revision and the conflict resolution page is a beginning. It's
looks
gonna
good.
keep evolving. And one of the things that we're also moving towards is kind of a button that's on every school webpage. You know, it's report the concerns. So whatever it is, it will, and then we'll centralize, it will come to
A person.
a person and we will try to resolve it. And again, it's looking at, sometimes it's a complaint, sometimes it's a concern, sometimes it's, I don't know what to do here. And that's the idea of, well, bring it to us and we'll figure out who we think should be the best person to resolve. Like, if we can do it at the school building level, I don't know how to
Yeah, I
resolve
mean,
this.
And I want to acknowledge that Jonathan oversees the complaint process and is home sick this week. He's actually quite under the weather.
Mhm.
So Mary and I provide legal support to that function, but I also want to not speak on Jonathan's behalf on all
I
things.
have to say that I also think that this is part of that, oh, sorry, that's my fault. Yes, I am Scottish.
Stand up.
Where are we marching?
So embarrassing. And it's PCS calling me, so good. I'm probably tardy to a class today, okay. So when I first came to PPS 10 years ago, it really felt like there was this culture of fear in a lot of places, like any complaint or any concern, there were sort of silos and there was sort of this feeling of like a fear of getting in trouble. And I feel like that, especially under Guadalupe's tenure, has really shifted, and that there's less fear of recrimination and it's more about improvement. And I think as we see these changes with the complaint policy and the new landing page and this emphasis on conflict resolution and some of the ways we've changed things, I think that's a continued culture shift. And I just want to thank you all for being part of the work to change that, where, you know, we are working at the building level, and then if the building level doesn't respond, it feels like people are more willing to go up the chain in a way that's constructive rather than fearful. So I really appreciate
I
that.
think Jonathan's team also has the family liaisons that are,
Yes.
there are a number of resources that are there to help families.
Rather than feeling like someone's gonna get in trouble, I feel like it's switched more to like, how can we help support families? That's just, I mean, I know it's not perfect across the district, but that's sort of a sense I've seen within my own communities.
So I have some, just ripping up with Michelle's comments, some like framing that I think should change, because when this was originally framed, it was that this is like, was the formal complaint process for Division 22, like
Right.
a broader, just like set the rules, so whether you were, and so we had other types of complaints listed, but like here's generally how we're going to approach the process. So if this is gonna be with part of the primary focus on Division 22, it seems like on the second page before you get to the formal complaints 22, there should just be a brief like framework of like here are the types of complaints. There's hopefully 80% of them, which go to the conflict resolution, they get resolved at the school, there's no formal complaints. Then there's the very small group, hopefully, of Division 22, which would be handled by this, and then the category of other complaints. Because I feel like if I'm trying to think as a parent, if I'm looking at this, I go to it like, hey, I don't complain about that teacher, my son's algebra teacher. And I look at this and it's like, oh, but now it's Division 22, I don't know what this is. So it seems like it would be good to have sort of this funnel at the top that's like, who are the types of complaints? Like if you have an issue with your son's algebra teacher, go to
Does that need to be in policy? I mean, I don't think that needs to be in the policy. I think that needs to be on the conflict resolution page.
well, it's called the complaint policy, so it seemed, I guess, what I found frustrating sometimes as a parent is like, you're having to go to a whole bunch of different links to get information versus like, hey, if you have an issue, I don't know why the complaint policy wouldn't have the same sort of like framing up of here are the different places and then like our very specific rules and timelines for Division 22 and then the, other provisions, which
I just
don't
don't, I don't,
apply to every.
I think it's cumbersome to put because I don't think we can put every single thing someone might complain about in the policy, so I think that makes it cumbersome.
I'm not suggesting that. It's just,
You're
think-
talking about a process that has a funneling effect or a gathering of all of the complaints and then funneling. Like, I thought that the website, it does list out the types of, are you talking about complaints that might not be here?
Well, okay, so one of the things we're doing here is making the majority of this and the very specific timelines, the appeals about Division 22. And that's one type of complaint. And then there's all the other ones.
Discrimination, special ed.
So just to make sure we're
Just
talking
trying
about
to
the same, so we made the decision not to put all the other specifics, so category 1, Title IX, SPED that have, so those we made the decision to not try to capture each and every one of those in this policy, because they appear in others and all.
They're in other policies, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's just use the most easy one, like the dog part.
The dog part. So I hear that you want some better language to help define what's in this policy on the front end in some general language, and we can work on that on page 2 ahead of, maybe in around paragraph A. When you get to paragraph 1 is about formal complaints, paragraph 2 is the other. Then you get to timelines, 2A is about all complaints, other and Division 22. Until you get to,
But it's not
Section
about the dog park.
yes, that's about the dog park.
The timelines?
Yes.
We're keeping that consistent. We want to
Yes.
keep it all consistent, so
It
your
veers when you
complaints
get,
should still be time limited.
when you get to section 4, that becomes a separate appeal process for Division 22 that isn't there for the dog park.
So I don't think that's intuitive, because it seems like you have Division 22 on page 2, and then the timelines, so.
Well, then
Yeah.
paragraph 2 that says other types of complaints. So there are 2 types of complaints. We can make that more robust, but both types of complaints are defined in that section 1. Section 2A is timelines for both of those categories, Division 22 and other. And then the appeal rights for Division 22 to the board is different. That's what we're attempting to do here. So if it's not clear, we need to make it clear.
That's not clear, so to me,
Yeah.
sorry.
I think, and if we added like timelines for all complaints, or
That would help, yeah.
Okay, so we can put that,
Well, maybe it's doing the timelines first. It's just,
timelines before we define.
the different kinds of complaints. You could just say this is the timeline for complaints.
We haven't, let us work on I think this is a complicated
Yes.
policy to follow. I think Division 22 is hard to explain as the category of complaint. It's not, no one talks about Division 22 except people in this building. So I do think there's a level of complexity here that's really hard to distill down. So let us try again to make that even clearer.
So a question, do you consider number 2, other types of complaints to be everything else is not
Division
Division 22? So the dog parks?
Yeah.
Sexual harassment,
No.
Title IX?
Well, there's reference, so it says,
But this paragraph would be like the whole universe of everything else.
yes.
So maybe a way to think about it is to start with what would be the majority, and then this specific category of.
And I do think it would be helpful here to have the links to the IEP, like if we have other timelines and other policy language about complaints to say, Title IX, policy number, those kinds of things to help people then find the information if that's what they're looking for.
Well,
Our approach, Ailey, and you guys are the boss and you're the decision makers, our approach has been to link to the website so it's all in one place.
because we have a unified form now. There's a single
Right.
form.
And we are constantly getting, the legislature, well-intentioned, is adding specific complaint procedures every session. And so we are constantly adding, if it's a violation of this, it now has its separate process.
Okay.
And so we are trying to, I worry we, in the context of updating over time, that something doesn't get added there. And it's not to make it harder, we actually want to make it easier. So I don't know, those are my
I think if
thoughts.
we maybe put in the policy that, like, if you're looking for these specifics, the best place to go, I know it's on there, but to really clarify, like, this conflict resolution has the most up-to-date information because laws are constantly changing.
Yeah, yes,
And then also I'm wondering about presenting the information in a table about the timelines, because that's also confusing. I mean, there's different timelines for different.
Well, we tried to be consistent with that, so we're doing, it is a single timeline
It's a
We can
single
put it in
timeline
for step one.
Okay,
but it's also 60 days, you'll get a final decision, within 60 days.
for
You have to
everything.
complain within 2 years of the
Okay,
incident.
Oh, that's what you mean,
That's-
that timeline,
that's-
yes.
Yes, and then you'll get an initial
Yeah.
response within 60 days of your complaint.
I like the idea of tables and bullet points whenever possible, and
Yes.
it's a really text-heavy policy. So let us take another cut at making it approachable, because I do think that is the goal.
Okay, again, in the context of, in the staff report where it talks about the racial equity and social justice impacts, and that we hear mostly from white families, I'm thinking about, just presenting information for someone that's gonna be really easy for a parent to find and
I do agree with,
understand.
sorry, Michelle, I do agree with Julia that how do we make it really clear that Division 20, I mean, I see what you're saying, Julia, about the policy not being clear on, we've got Division 22, we've got a couple of other buckets of complaints, and then we've got sort of these general complaints that we also want to help resolve within a clear, transparent timeline. So if we could clean up some of that language to make that a little more clear, that'd be helpful.
So the other thing, is in here, we talk about, going to the conflict resolution webpage, and then just looking at the webpage is, I think it's not clear that that's the complaints page, so I think the ORS or the administrative rules require us to have like the complaint landing page on the homepage, and it just says conflict resolution, and to me, conflict resolution is not the same as a complaint. And so having it be consistent, so on number 2, there's other types of complaints, then it says conflict resolution, I'm just making complaints webpage. So just-
Conflict/complaint resolution process, so maybe that's closer, but not exactly, that's on the landing page
I'm just
for the
thinking,
website.
people like, I wanna file a complaint, like, you wouldn't naturally look at the conflict. Like,
I agree.
I'm not in conflict, I want a
Well,
complaint.
if we just switch
Yeah,
complaint/conflict
I was just
resolution.
I think that would be good, Liz.
Yeah.
Complaint/conflict resolution.
If you look at Beaverton, then you type in Beaverton School District and complaint, it comes right up.
Yeah, we can do that.
Not to,
I mean, it's good to look around and see what other people are doing.
So The other thing in terms of Division 22, just since we're really drilling down on this is there's gonna be really specific on Division 22, I think it would be helpful to explain what Division 22 is. We sort of use it as just a, let's see, so you sent a description of, which I thought was useful to have, so like have that in the policy. Here's what it is, because Division 22 doesn't mean anything to most parents. And then, I originally was thinking, well, it'd be good to list all the Division 22s, but it's a pretty long list. Again, I'm trying to, I also don't think if you go to Division 22, is it an administrative rule?
Yes.
Okay, so if you go to the administrative rule, you actually get caught in this big, long thing. And if you were just looking for the list, like, is this Division 22? I don't know if there's some way for us, without listing it in the policy, but to link to just the list without sending them to the administrative rule, which then it's like, oh my God, they sent me to an administrative rule that is like impossible to.
But maybe the ODE webpage on complaints, which is not quite the OAR, because I do think I worry about us having a list that ODE changes and that it doesn't flow through. But I do think part of the opportunity here and what should be helpful to families is they don't have to know that it's Division 22. Like part of this intake is it's one of these categories that you allege the district isn't complying with, and it's our job to make sure it gets in the right lane. I mean, I think expecting families to be able to correctly categorize is not fair to families. I think the district's obligation is to say, this, what you're complaining about is this, and our best understanding is this, and this is where it should go.
And that's why in the complaint form, if you go through it, there are some drop downs. Right, so again, you don't need to know what the Division 20, whether it's within or out of Division 22. It has some prompts in it. You can describe what happened and you say, this is, and we offer you these drop down suggestions, like, is it this, and you get to check which one. And that, I think it helps the family, but it also helps us to understand, okay, this is what is at issue. Because usually, there's oftentimes, as you know, when you hear the multiple things that are.
I think you're right,
driving.
and I also think we should identify what's Division 22, because we're changing a practice where people feel like, hey, I get to appeal to the people I elected, told me that they would listen to the community about, issues that we have. And it's like, hey, how come my complaint didn't go to like the board? And so I think being able to be really clear about here's the items that go to the board, and here's the items that won't. And I think for a lot of people, it will be helpful if like, hey, I just put in, I have this problem with like my curriculum materials, and staff figures out whether it's Division 22 or something else. But other people may be like, I want to file a Division 22 complaint because I want to go to the board and I potentially want to go to ODE.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're filing a complaint about curriculum, and if you call it Division 22 or you don't, it's still a Division 22 complaint. So I'm not saying I disagree with you, but I want to get us back to the substance is the thing that should define the path, not whether the complainant says, I want a Division 22, or even I want the board. That's defined by the topic of the complaint. So we can figure out how to get a link to the list in there. I don't want it to be, I don't recommend, you guys get to decide, I don't recommend that it's a PPS created list that's linked, because again, that if ODE changes Division 22, then we haven't updated that in real time, but I bet we can find something that works.
Yeah, it's just so that we're not sending them
confident we can
to
find
like, hey, read through these 50 pages to find the list.
Yeah, and it's the OAR website's terrible in terms of trying to get to the list, but
That's why I'm raising it,
Yes.
because I went to
But the
try to
list
find
that I
the
sent,
list.
the list that I sent the committee members today, I got from I think I got it from the ODE website. So we'll figure out how to, and I think it's helpful for families who want to understand, well, what is the instructional requirement? I mean, it's good for families to have access to information if they want to learn more about it. And I think this isn't right in the curriculum, it doesn't feel right, but I want to see what the standard is. I mean, we need to help families across that spectrum, whether they want us to chase it or they want to go understand what the rules are, and we need to make that accessible in all those areas. So I think we can solve it without, with a list that gets updated by ODE automatically.
Like a smart text. It's too bad you couldn't use, like a smart text to pick up on people's plain language as they're writing a complaint. That would sort it into the same bucket.
Yeah.
The technology is probably there.
It's,
Are there other questions we have about this policy or things to raise before we send it back to staff?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I'm sort of reading it like in the old way, and I guess I'm trying to follow. So the filing of a formal complaint, step 1, 2, there's new language that provision 22 compliance, final decision will be made within 60 days. Is that a written decision? Because that's what you get.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll add that.
Do you want to add written decision?
So on, it's not in page numbers, so.
Is that on number,
Page
sorry,
4,
step
we have
1,
page
number
number
2?
Mine has page numbers.
Yeah, mine has page numbers. Says like 5 of 9 at the bottom.
So Mary's
Okay, well-
doesn't. Julie's doesn't, I don't know what's going on.
Mine on Board's Books does.
Maybe I get a separate upload of the workbook.
Or maybe this was, it didn't print when you printed it, I don't know.
Sorry, anyway, tell us.
Anyway, so I'll just try and describe it. Under 4, B, the board shall issue a final decision.
Oh, page 6.
So I don't know that the language needs to be updated, but our resolutions are often written that it says the board agrees with the findings. And this doesn't say anything about the findings, it's just whether the decision is. If we're gonna talk about the findings in our resolution, should this be changed, or do we wanna leave it decision and then have our resolution be about the board affirming the decision, not the findings?
I think that's probably a resolution issue, not a policy issue, but I'm also in favor of the board having some latitude on the decision, because these things come to the board in a number of different formats, so I think you want to be sure that it's clear what the board is deciding. I'm not sure it's helpful to put really defined boxes around that in the abstract before it gets to, so I don't know, I'm not sure what we're trying to solve.
Sometimes we're like agreeing with the findings and it's like, but that's different from the
Can be.
decision.
Can be, yes.
So it seems like if we're gonna include that, then we have to include it, otherwise we're not following the policy when we just are approving resolutions saying that we agree with the findings.
I don't recommend adding findings to the policy, but it's up to you guys if you want to.
Okay, well then we need to make sure that when we vote on things, that we're upholding the decision, affirming the decision, not the findings.
Okay.
Is that,
Well,
because that's not,
We have two different paths right after we hear a complaint.
There's
It's
affirmed and it's considered final and therefore appeal to ODE, appealable, not appealable to ODE. Or it's reversed, which it still could be, it's still a final decision that can be appealed, but often it comes with a direction from the board to the district to take certain actions or do certain things.
Issue an apology, whatever. Okay.
I guess the issue I have is with the word decision.
I'm hearing your issues with the word findings in the resolution.
Well,
I'm
I'm-
still
I'm-
looking for the,
top of page
Because
6.
we often approve resolutions that talk about the findings, but don't talk about the decision. Like, we affirm the findings.
That's our decision.
oh, here we go. Page 5.
Well,
I think I think that issue can be addressed in resolutions. If I'm understanding the concern.
Right, because otherwise, I don't think we're following the policy if we're just like, hey, we agree with the findings.
So we are affirming the district's decision. instead of, we'll have to just change the resolution language to say resolve that we're affirming
Yes.
the district's decision. Yeah.
So the other thing I would say is, instead of reversed, is there, so that doesn't seem the opposite of affirmed?
It's actually
Is that-
highly, that's what a court of appeals would use, which doesn't mean that's what a school board should do. But that is, it's affirmed or reversed is what a court does. It's but I don't, you are not a judicial body except for this very
Thank
narrow thing.
goodness.
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe you can get some robes out of it. But, no, that is the judicial language of affirmed or reversed when something's on appeal, but I don't know that that's required, that language is required here. What's required is a clear final decision that a complainant could take to ODE. So we're, I think, trying to make sure that the board's decision is final and clear. This was added, I think, in the last round of revisions, so was trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if not affirmed is appropriate, that seems better than reversed, because reverse seems like they reverse the decision, and usually it's a creation.
So you wanna change reverse to not affirmed in whole or in part?
So, I mean, I think this is not gonna be what you wanna do, but one thing you could do, as Mary's suggesting here, is you could just say, the board shall issue a final decision after the hearing, period. And your final decision can be framed, that gives you more latitude for decision versus findings versus, but it just needs to be a final decision that's clear. And that, then you don't have to fight with that construct under Measures 1 and 2. That may not be what you want, because those were just put in here fairly recently.
Can we? Does that comply with the Division 22?
You have to
that-
issue a final
so we-
decision.
So we come up with the final decision, and essentially people can appeal it.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
I mean, you want it to be clear so the family understands the decision and ODE can understand the decision. And again, I don't think this has been a problem, but that's I think your.
What do you think, Julia? I'm okay with changing it to not affirmed, but I'm also okay with just saying the board shall issue a final decision. What are you thinking?
I actually think it's better to have affirmed and not affirmed, because that seems like a little bit clearer to people, because if the decision is affirmed, it's like the board agrees with the superintendent and that's it. Whereas a final decision, it just seems like that leaves it open to.
So if we could change that to not affirmed in whole or in part and may direct, so just change reverse to not affirmed.
I mean, most of the time we're doing number one, which seems.
But although we sometimes not affirm in part, right?
Right.
I don't think we've ever in whole turned something over, but we've often said,
But I think that gives more clarity, like, hey, the board agrees with the superintendent, like, you can disagree with it, but like that versus a final decision, which maybe people are parsing.
Okay, yeah, we can make that
is
change.
that okay with you, Michelle and Gary?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Yes, it is.
Anything else, Julia or Michelle or Gary on this? Again, we're sending this back to staff. We'll have another draft before it at the next meeting, so this is a work in progress. We're not voting it out today or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the staff goes to heroic efforts to get things scheduled. And I know sometimes we're part of the issue of getting something scheduled, so I'm wondering if the 90 days, so is.
We have some complainants that will not agree to a meet, and so we have years where complaints are sitting, and I think that's not helpful. So we're trying to find a mechanism that's fair and generous, that also lets us conclude the process with lots of attempts to accommodate, but they just simply won't agree to schedule. It just sits there and we get this weird, it's almost a donut of compliance problem where they're gonna run out of time to appeal if we don't have a final decision
Yes.
until they cross to the next, so they can get there a different way, but it's complicated for everybody, and again, I think it's not, we work really hard to schedule and accommodate what the complainant's schedule is within reason of what the board can do. So that's what we're trying to solve. It doesn't mean that this is the right way to do it, but
Because without it, their appeal right is also time limited. And so if they don't get the final decision from us,
yeah, and then you cross over,
They
then they
cross
get,
that
I think it can probably be revived, but there's this double time limit problem within the rule.
Do we understand why people are running the clock out? Is it that they don't know at the other end that they're running up against
I can
the
think of
time at
two,
which they can
no,
appeal?
we've told that, so when we have said that, when we said you're getting to the 2-year mark, and we wanna make sure you have all your rights preserved, that has been helpful, but it's also been 2 years, where the district acted a year and a half ago, and we've been waiting that long to get to the board. Sometimes it's a family that has a crisis, or we're like, great, we have a medical issue, we'll stand down. But other times it's, I wanna go get more information, I wanna do things that actually, which we say, yeah, how much time do you need? But it's already been through, at that point, this example was from a 3-step process, it's already been through 2 layers. Now it's a 2-step process, but it just gives us a mechanism to get finality to a decision with lots of notice and lots of opportunities. And again, we're trying to find the most generous, accessible way, but also we need a mechanism to make a decision.
So, yeah,
And
and
someone has
also
appealed,
to
but
allow
yeah.
them enough time too, right?
Right. So again, this may not be the right construct, but that's the problem.
It'd be one of those things where because if I know what the history that we've got several on the books for a couple of years, be okay with adding this in. I guess I would, if we started having a bunch of them, that, when we get into the busy season or, summertime, whatever it is, the board, we're like, here are the 2 dates, and I'm like, well, those don't work for us, and then it's like, oh, the 90 days. I guess I would wanna just.
I think
a
all
little bit
reasonable
less-
attempts is intended to be, the burden is on the district to make all reasonable attempts.
And I think we can ask for that, right, at the hearing, to say what all happened to try to
Yeah.
coordinate with this complainant.
And then just to be clear, the board may consider an appeal on the written material, so the board would have a meeting.
And it says may consider, not that we have to, so we could also say, even though it's been the 90 days, we wanna give this family more time, or we want the staff to try to reach out again.
So I'll be okay with that. I would add in there that, be specific that we're actually gonna have a meeting.
Okay.
Because otherwise, it could be just like, hey, we're gonna circulate the written materials and,
Okay.
and, who knows, that may, inspire people to.
Yeah. I think that helps Julia to say we're gonna have a
Right, and you
meeting
can
to
make sure that they
consider.
have notice.
Consideration is a public meeting or a complaint hearing, whatever. That makes sense, Julia.
Hopefully you can make it.
Yeah, and it is not designed to squeeze people's.
We just need to.
Yeah.
And I think it also, if there is an issue and the district needs to care for it, it's helpful to do that in a transparent way. Okay, anything else on this policy? You can always submit if emails between now and the week before the policy committee meeting as well.
Yeah, I've got one more thing, but I'm trying to read my notes. So this came up, an individual who has filed a couple complaints, raised this issue of, number 13 of the not knowing that they can't communicate with, board members.
It was in public comment at the last meeting or the meeting before, I think.
after they filed a complaint. And so I don't know, maybe that's part of what gets communicated to individuals. I think the other thing is tightening a process on the other side, that we still get communications from staff about something, and if we're again being this like quasi judicial, which we're not, forum, like we're still getting information from one side, but not the complaint.
So we do, I mean, there is, except for confidential materials, attorney-client or FERPA protected materials, anything that goes to the board from staff goes to the complainant before the appeal. They have the opportunity to submit more information as part of that formal process. I mean, number 13 has been through a lot of iterations and is not, I'm not advocating for or defending the practice.
Yeah,
I think it has, as you and I know have talked about, I think it has complexity to administer that's very inconsistent with the roles you will play as elected officials. And I think it's a hard rule to put a firm fence around. But I understand the intent behind it. So we can try to, we try to make sure there's free flow of information. I think this is less about communication to the full board and was more about, when it was drafted, about individual communications between complainants and individual board members, right? I think that was the.
Okay, but that still happens. I mean, yeah, so people, know somebody on the board, or you're like, I'm in your zone and I don't like what happened.
The way that, this is the inconsistency with 99.5% of your job is to have those kinds of conversations. This is a very different exception to that in terms of elected board behavior. And it puts the onus on the board member to say, I'm sorry, I can't have that conversation with you outside of the formal appeal process.
I would be happy to, so I think the issue was around people independently investigating things or trying to resolve stuff on their own without the full board. So I think if we wanted to modify this to say board members should not knowingly initiate contact with complainants about the topic of a complaint or independently investigate allegations in the complaint. I mean, I think if.
Well, it could be on us.
It's on us.
As a complainant.
Right, so if we're not initiating contact and we're not independently investigating something, I think that's the concern, not that we don't speak to complainants. It's this.
That's actually not the issue I'm raising at all. I mean, I don't have any issue with that piece. I think it's just confusing because people are like, what do you mean I can't talk to you about it? It's
It
like,
would be the first person they'd want to talk to, probably.
But we would, if we took out continue contact with, then that would save that, because if we're not initiating and we're not investigating, if someone contacts us and says, hey, you're my person in this zone, I have this issue and it's in complaint process, then we can say, okay, like, we can talk to them, but it's different than us initiating or us investigating.
yeah, that's that. I don't have any problem with the current rules. What I'm saying is that to make this workable, like, we have to be really clear to people, like, once they're in the complaint process. And then I guess is this Division 22 or is
Division 22 only.
This doesn't say we can't talk to someone who, like, I could talk to a complainant about a complaint they have if they brought it to me. This doesn't say that we can't talk to them. It says we can't initiate or investigate.
Okay, I'm confused.
Can,
We're looking at number 13,
No,
right? On
now,
page
now I'm
8.
confusing like other provisions. I assumed that this applies to everything, but you're saying.
no, because the other ones don't come to the board. So it's only those that come to the board on appeal.
Okay, this is a structure thing again, how it's laid out, because.
Yep.
If. It seems like we should have, like, hear all the complaints and
We'll work on the structure.
I want to hear what she's going to say then.
well, because I was thinking what you had said was, actually the timelines and everything else apply to the,
That's why it says that the attempt with the red line addition on 13 is to limit it to Division concerning compliance with Division 22. Once they have filed a formal complaint concerning compliance with Division 22. So it was designed to make sure that it's clear that this provision applies only to those, because those are the only ones that are appealable to the board. That's what that red line changes. It obviously didn't do it well enough, but that's what it was designed to do, is to narrow its application to only those.
Yeah, maybe this is actually just a piece that goes with the Division 22 section. It's confusing.
And I'd be okay if we just changed it to board members should not knowingly initiate or independently investigate allegations in a complaint once they've been notified that a formal complaint has been, with Division 22 has been filed.
That's not the point that I'm.
Those are
Okay.
two different points.
So I'm trying to help resolve what your point is, and I'm
Yeah,
not understanding, I'm sorry.
But I-
To be specific, because, I mean, my sense is the vast majority of complaints, so somebody's gonna call and say, I have a complaint about, X, or like, I submitted this thing and I haven't heard from the district. It's just knowing where that funnel is. And then the second piece is, I guess, I also, am interested in that as information flows to the board informally, that seems like, hey, we're getting more information from one side than if we're gonna be, hey, we can't.
You are not a court of law. I mean, like, I just, like,
I
so,
totally
I know we agree on that, and so telling staff you can't have information, we get requests from board members about background information related to complaints, so
Well, like
It's-
staff
yeah.
initiating just engagement with board members about a complaint. It seems like it makes it unfair then to the parent, like, hey, you can't talk to board members about it because they have a duty not to talk about it.
So I think we can say to complainants, they can send us information. Complainants can send us additional information. Complainants can reach out to us. It's that we cannot initiate and we cannot investigate.
that's with your change, the change you've proposed. I think
Right.
the language here does not content.
Because it says to not continue contact.
Individualized information,
We-
but
Right.
Yeah,
I do,
we already have that though. It
But
earlier
we
it
do-
talks about that the complainant may provide additional information prior to.
Well, and we have a complainant right now who will email the entire board to say, where are we on this next step? And so that's different because it's the whole board.
I mean, one thing you could do is delete paragraph 13.
I really don't,
Okay.
I don't want to delete paragraph 13. I would like us to amend it so that we can, and I do think, how do we encourage families to submit an additional information or complainants to continue sharing information with the whole board? I mean, I think that's the other thing is if certain people are talking to certain people and then that it becomes this whole who has information and who's saying what to whom, how can we share that information in a way that's transparent?
I think the goal of the rule was to prevent individual board members from having side conversations with complainants in the middle of a formal complaint process
Or
that other board members didn't have access to, which is different than how does the board have the information it needs to decide from either the complainant or
From
the
all
district.
parties.
And because this isn't, so I think we should distinguish, we could do harm to information receipt by conflating that with what this paragraph was designed to do. So this is actually about making sure everyone has the same information, not individual board members having additional information based on certain conversations. As I recall, this did not come through staff, this came from a board recommendation. So as I recall the discussion at the time, which is imperfect, legislative history. That's the problem it was trying to solve. And I think we'd want to think through other steps we put into place that would limit information to the board who's just trying to make the right
Right.
decision.
We want to,
Thanks.
I think that's 100% correct, Liz. We want information from the complainant. We want them to be able to respond to what the district is saying. And we want to make sure that individual board members aren't acting in a way that undermines the work of the board as a whole and our ability to sort of transparently communicate with our complainants.
I also want to complicate things by saying, I mean, there is also a danger. At step one, we've assigned someone to investigate, to look at all the materials. So if information is going to the board and not going to that person, then they may be providing a not complete response because information that may be coming to the board is not going to the person who's conducting the investigation. So I mean, that's just another thing to think about. The
Yeah, but has that happened? I mean, generally when it seems like information gets sent to the board, it gets forwarded to staff.
I don't know that it sense, does it?
So Julie,
I don't know
what
in
would you
terms
like-
of the emails, I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying that's one of the risks. I don't know if it's going directly to the person who is investigating, that this additional conversation came up and there are other things. Where we typically see it is in the appeal is this didn't respond to A, B, or C, or whatever, that's what comes up. So I don't,
So Julia, what would you like to have the complaint policy say around sort of that flow of information and the ability to get information as a board?
Well, I think the first thing is like structuring it so it's clear that that's just Division 22, because there are so many things that I think board members, because of their community relationship, like keep out of the complaint process, because we're like, hey, if you just called so-and-so, or, you know,
100%.
So and this is after, this only, I think you're right, this only pertains to things that are in Division 22 formal complaint, this 13.
like I say, we're changing the policy so that there's like two clear pathway now. And I think we want to be clear that that's the Division 22 pathway.
Yes.
Because, for example, so we get the notice that here are the 4 complaints that have been filed. So if any of these 4 people call you and want to talk to you about the complaint, you have to say, no, that's in the formal complaint process. You can't talk to them. But if one of those individuals calls you about a topic that's not on the list that gets sent out to the board meeting, and it's something like, hey, you know what? If you just called so-and-so, or if you raise this with the principal, you know, here's like a possible solution, you don't need to file a complaint. That is, I think, what you I think board members, why, because of their relationships, can be helpful.
Right. I
Totally
agree with you.
Totally.
Mhm.
And so because we're changing the policy now.
We'll move it. We'll move it.
Yeah, just to be, so that'll satisfy your concern then?
Yeah, well, and I guess I'll have just continuous concern about the board getting more information from staff that maybe that the parent has access to.
So wait, the
Policy requires us to share it with them though, unless it's confidential, generally for work or privilege. So
And then, and I think, can we put something in there, I mean, that the information that the board should have all the information that the parent shares with the district as well? Because I know
So
there's been a couple times where like
let's talk
a video
about
hasn't been shared with the board that was referenced in the complaint materials and those kinds of things.
So I want to make sure I understand what you want, because from an appeal standpoint, there could have been, I mean, I think Jonathan and Alex are here, so I want to make sure we are using the same language. I'll go ask Alex and Jonathan and make sure I understand. There's the basis for the decision, but I think they get all the materials anyway. I think you guys get all the step 1 materials that they submitted, so I think that's already what
Actually, in the
happens.
last year, we had something where the parent was like, did you see the video? And it's
So I
like,
remember that.
no,
Yeah.
we didn't see the video.
Yep.
And when I looked at it afterwards, it wouldn't have changed my opinion, but it seemed like the
Yeah,
parent
no, I think
thought,
that was a miss.
that was a key.
Oh.
And it does
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like when we don't have that stuff, it feels like it feels like the district's hiding something. I don't think we are, but I think that's what it comes across
I
I
as.
think that was the expulsion.
Yeah, good process gives confidence in people with
So
decisions, even
I think we should be very clear that the board gets all of the like if a parent has submitted a video, if a parent has submitted a letter or whatever, that should be part of our packet.
I think that's already in, we'll confirm. I think that was,
It just
I
has-
think that was a miss on the video because it was, I don't know why.
There's been twice in my time on the board where a video has been referenced in the materials and we never received it. And
They were both,
As a
I think,
whole.
they were both were disciplined.
one was a discipline, one was not.
Okay. The one that I know, the most recent one was.
Yeah, was a discipline.
I think in looking at it, it was a miss. We relied on the photographs.
Yes.
Well, Mary, you didn't prepare that.
Like I say, it didn't
So we're
even
the
make,
people who did the art.
It did make a difference, but it doesn't look good when the board doesn't have access to all the materials that the parent has submitted or that are under consideration.
Okay, we will incorporate this really helpful feedback into the next draft, so thank you.
Does that solve, Gary, some of your concern about getting information from families? Okay. Okay, thank you for taking this back again and looking at it and refining it even more. I think everybody's goal on this committee and I think on the full board is to resolve things well so families can feel good about their experience with UPS. All right, next up is our anti-racist and anti-oppression learning communities. This is a compliance based on some legislative changes. So Liz or Mary, who's on deck for this one?
I'll do the short version. Mary's worked on this more than I have, but I think I can do it. The legislature passed a statute requiring us to have a policy that says non-discrimination policies and practices apply to volunteer organizations that support high schools. I don't think this is entirely an OSAA rule, but I think you can think about that. It extends beyond that, and that they have to have complaint procedures. So we have it was a very granular standalone policy. We thought it fit well in this policy as the place to comply with that, and then there'll be language anyway. So that's what the background, and that's what the red lines reflect.
Are there any questions about this policy?
No.
Are we ready to vote it out of committee? Oh, sorry, Julia.
So I was curious, because it looked like from the staff report, I don't have the statutory language, but did they specifically say high school? Because just conceptually, it seems like we wouldn't want organizations working with our students that have.
Oh, district's high school.
I actually can't remember if the statute says that, but we should
No,
take,
we
we should take, it should not say.
Okay,
Sorry,
so,
Yeah, good catch.
so in the staff report, but also in the language is
Yep.
high schools? So I'm sorry, the statute says K-12.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we should
No.
delete high school from that paragraph.
that was my mistake.
So it should read with the administrators, coaches, advisors, student participants, and others associated with the district's activities, programs, and events shall conduct themselves in a manner that is consistent with the letter and the spirit of the district's policies, rules, and regulations, and of any volunteer organization, including voluntary organizations that administer interscholastic activities or that facilitate the scheduling and programming of interscholastic activities.
And for what it's worth, Team Group is referenced here was involved in helping, in the court case, in helping PPS draft some of its policies.
So with that change, is everyone okay with sending this to the full board?
Yes.
Gary? Yes. Julia?
Yep.
And I'm a yes as well. Okay, so we'll move the anti-racist and anti-oppression to the full board for compliance. Okay, our next is the CUB policy, which we have a very amazing red line draft here that
We apologize.
there is a clean record as well.
We're trying to set the stage.
Yeah, I really appreciate the change in tone.
What we had is a collection of policies at very different levels, and I think the overarching goal, what originally came through at the request of the real estate group was some changes to the policy, the .30 version,
Yeah.
that had some very granular rules in it. And it occurred to us as we were thinking about amending, skateboards, that level of rulemaking isn't where the board usually sits, and those things change and need to be addressed. So we thought those were better addressed in an AD, but the overarching policy language should appear in the 1.0, the .010 policy, and give the authority to set those boundaries with the goal of like, we welcome community use of facilities. District students and the district uses have priority over that, and uses can't conflict with that. And try to find that balance in the policy language, which again was already there in large part. But the decision and the reason we gave you this draft AD, it's not done, was that you had a sense of what was moving over to the AD. Rescinding it doesn't eliminate it, it's shifting to a place where it can be better managed.
Right, so what our proposed AD is currently is policy 3.30020 and 030 are the two current policies that we have put together as a single administrative directive.
So I'm looking at the red line version of 3.30.010, and I'm on the cut between page 1 and page 2. And it reads, the superintendent shall implement administrative directives that implement this policy, create a custodial fee waiver process for organizations. So there needs to be and or
Yeah.
comma
Yeah.
or
Sorry.
It's
And
a rough
create-
edit, as you
yeah.
can tell.
I read that like 4 times trying to understand what it meant and then realized it was maybe not me.
So it's not having the custodial fee waiver in the administrative directive.
No, it stays in the policy.
Right.
So one thing that I'm concerned about that's being eliminated here, and it may seem like it's an efficiency because the district is the same thing as school. It's in paragraph 1.
A number of places actually
Where we cross off school.
Yeah, so here's what happened when the district was short on money. It's like, okay, one way that we get money is we, rent out our buildings. And there is a shortage of gym space in the district. And so, like, when my kids were at a Title I middle school, like, they couldn't use their gym because PPS rented it out, like, in advance at the beginning of the school year to, non-school community groups. And so the reason why school is in here is, like, school communities should have, like, priority on their own building. And so that, like, this was a case of the district, like, hey, we're gonna generate more revenue by.
We can put it back. I think this separation of the district is different than the school and we are all one combined group was the intent behind that deletion. So it was a very affirming, but we can put it back. I mean,
Yeah, I have a problem with putting it back because I do think the separation between my school and the district is problematic. So is there a way to put a different term that's not district or school, but
Maybe it's stating that school communities should have the first use of their facilities before it goes into the cut process?
So we have, there's another administrative directive that
It's like, this is
sits
a real,
under.
it was a real thing.
Yeah,
no, I'm
so
not saying it's, yeah.
there is an administrative directive now that says the use of district facilities, and it says district facilities are available for short-term use when such use does not conflict with district programs, operations, or activities and in accordance with the priority use list. I don't know if that helps.
And what's the priority use
Yeah,
list?
so
Oh, you know what, I wish Kirsten, she's ill today, and she could tell us.
But that is the school's
here's where
use.
what the sort of breakdown is, like, good intentions, like, hey, we gave this to the school community, the principal wasn't responsible, the principal didn't, like, block the time, so it got put into the pool use, and because in this case, you guys didn't have, a huge parent community that was off, like, reserving the time, when you want to go use the gym at, try and use the gym at during basketball season, it was like, oh, we already rented that out, you needed to reserve it in the fall.
so I think we need Kristen and Dana here because we are now at a level of complexity of how these things get booked, the agreements with parks, all the things that I think it's more than just editing the language and trying to find clarity. So and again, Kirsten's really sick also, so there's so much bad stuff going on. I hope we all are healthy after this meeting. But I think having a conversation with the committee about that would be helpful to understand how to define the problem and draft for it. Is that okay, Julie?
And there is there is a list of the priorities, and it starts with districts and schools, so that's the number one priority, and it moves down to PTAs.
Yeah, I say just like, is more like how it got implemented, so I was in another non-title, like very privileged community that had a lot of like infrastructure, like, hey, we're gonna just reserve basically the gym from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night, cause we've got, 3 levels of 6th grade boys basketball, 3 levels of, like, we're gonna need it all. And they just, like, don't even bother using it, and other school communities aren't, and they don't have that same level of infrastructure, wouldn't know to like, hey, you gotta block it off, otherwise the district's gonna rent it out.
I understand the issue. I have no idea what the answer is.
I think we can bring that back, those questions back.
Yeah, sorry, I wish I had more.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll bring that back to when she's back and can talk us through that. Because I think,
But I
I'm
put it
hoping
in
we have a
here.
cultural shift of, like, I often hear people talk about the district as this other. Like, the district is the thing we all are, and if anyone's the district, it's like the 4 of us and
Yeah.
all the people in this
Yes.
room, but everyone talks about the district, and so I'm hoping that with our language and how we can maybe make a cultural shift, which I think is what you were trying to do.
Right.
But I see your point, Julia, that we want to be really clear that that local school building and the community and program there should be the priority. So how do we do both of those things?
So Mary and I will work on the language part of that, and then Kirsten can talk about the implementation
Right.
part of that and make sure the language is consistent. But I understand the point that the students at that school should have the priority. I also know it sits in this CUB process, and again, parks, rents, gym, so I worry about what I don't know in terms of collateral impacts or conflicts.
Yeah.
But we will work on the language that tries to draw out that the school use has priority within the district field.
I can tell you the times I've rented school buildings, which has been a lot. I've always been told, like, if there's a volleyball game or there's a basketball game happening or PTA,
You get bumped.
yeah.
Anything else on that? It'll come back. So we're not gonna vote this out for first reading because we have quite a bit.
So some changes.
And then they can-
Okay, are we ready to move on to rescissions, or is there anything else about the CB policy for the time? And it'll come back in our January meeting.
So just to clarify, we'd be rescinding this one,
20130,
I thought,
because this
Is
will
it
then
201
become an administrative directive.
Sorry,
So
my email to you is not complete because I did not include 2.0 in the rescission, so I'm sorry about that, Julia.
Yeah,
When I
so
responded
the
today.
administrative directive, the proposed administrative directive is a mashup of 2.0 and 3.0. So both of them would need to be rescinded.
the board action would be to get rid of, to rescind 2.0 and 3.0, and then to modify.
Yes.
1.0.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And we're not doing any of that today. We're holding all of that for the January meeting so we can hear from Kirsten and get some clarity on some of that.
Thankfully, the agenda had it right. I could have looked at that before.
Anything else on the CUB? Aye. Leah or anyone else? Okay, then we'll move on to number 5, rescissions, 1.70.012, presentations by citizens and employees.
These, to the extent there are rules that are consistent with or in the same category of these, they exist in other places. And it's not, I don't think it adds to the protocols and conduct of the board meetings that the board is trying to set. It's got some outdated language and feel, and you have this in other places. So it's a decision about whether you want something, if you want this to be a policy, then I would recommend it be amended and it be, some other things get probably, there's a sole source of information about this. I think it's done very well in the board materials and other, I'm struggling for what we call the things that you have that we post, that we tell people, here's what we expect at board meetings, here's the conduct. Presentations by citizens, we generally have public comment, or if someone asks for a particular topic or ability to speak to the board, that goes to leadership or agenda setting. I mean, it just doesn't really fit with the practices of the board today. It's not that some of these things don't exist in other forms. it's just, it's kind of an awkward policy in its current form. We think it's addressed elsewhere, it's the staff recommendation.
What does the policy say?
What does the policy say? It's, the beginning of it, presentation by citizens and employees.
Members of the
1.0
general
point.
public who plan to make presentations at board meetings should register their intentions with the Office of Board Services prior to the beginning of the meeting. So we have public
We do.
comment, we don't really have a sign up at the beginning of a meeting for citizen presentation, right? It's not a,
Right, and we also don't use the word citizen anymore,
Right, there's
right, that's racist.
And also, is there not an Office of Board Services anymore? I mean,
Yeah.
everything since 1971 has changed.
yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, so that's why we have like the community budget review committee as a citizen budget. Review. Change. Yeah.
So matters to be presented to the board at a board meeting by representatives of employee organizations, like unions, shall first be submitted in writing. That's not what the contract says.
No.
So I mean, it just is a,
And we don't set time limits on, yeah. I'm great, I'm fine to rescind it because I do think it's carried in other places.
I'm fine to rescind it too, because the alternative is going to leadership, like with the not-for-profit
Yeah.
community, just asking if they could do a presentation, it worked out really well. They
Gary,
asked
what
for
do you
20
think?
minutes.
You're fine to rescind, Julia?
It's fine.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move that to be rescinded at the, January 26th. Okay, I did a formal vote on the first one, but I haven't done a formal vote on any of these other ones. Do we need to do that?
We didn't do anything on any of those.
We, on the very first one, the EEK, we
To move, that was.
We moved it
To move it.
first reading. But you also, you asked and you got a verbal confirmation
right
on
from
the,
everybody on all of the other ones.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else before we move to public comment? All right, Ms. Bradshaw, do we have anyone sign up for public comment? Okay. Well, then we will consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your hard work and enjoy your 40 minutes.